Teach me the ways of the Force, oh great shark slash puma ghost! Mentor me in the art of space wizardry!
Dudes! Welcome to the Kongversation! Sorry, I'm still coming off Toxmania, so I have to retrain my brain. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And on this episode of DK Vines, the Kongversation, Donkey Kong Universe discussion, we'll be discussing the Tales from the Sea of Thieves book. It's written in real life by Paul Davies and published by Titan Books with input from Rare and additional content by, get this, Chris Alcock. So, it's a lot to talk there, but first, a quick plug for DK Vine on Patreon. Now, if you like the Kongversation, know that every episode is live streamed to a private Twitch audience for $5 a month and up. And you'll also get the Kongversation a day earlier than anyone else for just $2 a month and up. And all that money goes towards supporting DK Vine. So check it out, dkvine.com/Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe to DK Vine on YouTube, as well as follow us on Facebook and Twitter for daily updates. And if you're playing Sea of Thieves, or if you want to get into Sea of Thieves, but you're afraid you don't have anyone to play with, join the DK Vine crew coordinator on Discord. It's open to anyone who actually owns Sea of Thieves, and you can find out all the details on that by heading towards the DK Vine Club on Xbox or the Xbox app. So be sure to do that. Hi, Cameron. How are you doing?
Oh, doing just fine, Hyle.
Well, you are here, as
Thank
am
you for
I.
noticing.
Yes, I'm very observant. I feel like I had to be observant after reading this book. So, this is Tales from the Sea of Thieves, and I believe we're the only two staffers who have read it.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Hyle. I just read Cliff's Notes from the Sea of Thieves.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do they even make Cliff Notes anymore? I know there's like Spark Notes, but is Cliff Notes even still a brand that exists?
I don't know. I'm just taking the risk of dating myself in my primary school age.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to date ourselves on the Kongversation. On DK Vine's The Kongversation. No, we wouldn't want to do that at all. So,
anyway, remember that episode of Frasier?
I do remember that episode of Frasier where he was like, Niles! And Niles was like wiping things with his cloth. Yeah, that was funny. That was a very smart show, Frasier. So, Cameron, when Rare announced that there was going to be a lore book coming out for Sea of Thieves, I admit that I was a bit hesitant about the implications that would bring forth. And I think the reason is because aside from instruction manuals and player's guides and proclamations by Rare staffers online, specifically Lee Loveday in Scribes for all those years, there's never been much in the way of canon fiction for the games in the shared Rare universe outside of the games themselves. See, our rule of thumb at DK Vine is that only the video games themselves are canon. Ancillary materials can be canon, but the games will always overrule them if they contradict.
I think like maybe the closest situation we've had to this, at least as far as the games we cover is concerned, is the Star Fox Adventures manga.
Yeah, I was going to say the closest situation I can think of, not even going into book form, is the Viva Pinata cartoon show. And that's, I think, one of the only examples of spin-off material that we actually consider basically canon, and that's because Rare actually consulted on it, has their logo on it. Even the DVDs released of the show have the Rare logo on it.
The original game has the exact same intro as the TV show.
So, I think that's one of the only examples, quite controversially, or controversially, of course. We don't consider the Donkey Kong Country cartoon canon, and that's weirdly a point of contention.
Well, no, his name wasn't Canon, Hyle. His name was Captain Scurvy.
Oh, of course. See, I don't care. No, it's a weird point of contention among online Donkey Kong nerds, because so many people out there love that cartoon show. And of course, infamously, Chad and I, when we founded DK Vine, we found it in 1999 when the cartoon was still on the air, and we openly reviled it. And, my opinions on it have softened over the years, but not enough to embrace it as any sort of canon. I think that the best you're going to get is rare, actually canonizing elements from the cartoon in Donkey Kong 64, like the crystal coconuts, or the fact that Tiny Kong's wardrobe is very close to Dixie Kong's wardrobe, Cranky being a chemist, things like that. But yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't get on board with Congo Bongo Isle and King K. Rool and Bluster. And if that stuff is introduced into the games, fine. But I think
it's fine to appreciate in a bubble. It's just you're going to have to squint at even more than DK Vine is usually accustomed to squinting at to try and fit all the pieces together. Exactly.
And that's fine. And if you're a fan of it, if you want it to be your personal canon, yeah, that's fine. But there's a reason we at DK Vine, kind of draw the line there, quite controversially. Having basically spin-off media that's hardcore canon is a new concept for us. And it really speaks to Rare making, I think, a modern game. Sea of Thieves, for all of the critical split it's got right now, it is very much a game unlike anything Rare has delved into before, and it is much more a game of 2018 than any of their past titles, even if it does things defiantly its own way. So the thought of sitting down and reading an entire book of Sea of Thieves lore that was, one, written by an outside author, even with input from Rare, it was still written by an outside author, made me feel like it was going to be something that was ripe for contradictions. And then when it was revealed that some fan writings, some fan contributions were going to make it in the book as well, detailing their favorite moments playing the technical alpha, I sort of tuned it out even further, because it's one thing to watch somebody's, say, video walkthrough of a game. I can find that entertaining. But reading someone describe their gameplay session, Christ, that just sounds like the dullest thing in the world to me. I would much rather play the game, experience it for myself, than rather have it experienced through somebody else's eyes. Maybe that makes me a hypocrite since I do a damn podcast about this stuff, but that's the way I kind of feel. The way the book was presented to us through press releases, that's the way I felt at the time.
Yeah, I didn't know quite what to make of the information that we were presented in regards to this book. Essentially all I understood was there was a small sampler of this that was handed out to fans, and we knew that it was going to contain stories based on people's experiences with the game, or at least it certainly seemed that way. And judging by the title, something they've pushed with this game from the very outset is that it's more about players creating their own stories than the game presenting a story for you. So I had just kind of had this image in my head, especially since the art book was also known to be in existence at the time, that I had kind of had this conception, okay, the art book is going to be the serious business, actually tell you about the world of the game and all that, and Tales of Sea of Thieves is going to be, I expected a rather short, collection of amusing short stories based on people's play sessions, with maybe some light bit of leaning into the narrative here and there. Kind of got the full reverse proportions of that.
Yes, and much to my relief. Now, as it turns out, Tales from the Sea of Thieves was very well done, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was a brilliant piece of literature on par with the classics or anything. But, I'll be damned if I wasn't enthralled reading it. And Cameron, we were going to do this episode like more than a week ago, and it kept getting pushed back because I found that what I thought was going to be somewhat of a boring book assignment for my podcast turned out to be quite a riveting read, and I realized I'm doing myself a disservice by trying to rush through this when there's so much that speaks to my love of Rare's world in this book, and I really need to take my time with it and soak in every details. I've actually gone through it twice now, so I feel like I am well prepared. You were waiting for your signed copy. You actually ordered it on the website, the Sea of Thieves website. You got something signed by Rare staffers. Am I right?
Yes, I think the 3 signatures tended to be like different for like depending on your copy of the book. I assume what they did was they had like groups of employees sign like a stack of books, just so like a handful of people weren't breaking their hands signing however many hundreds to thousands of books there were. My copy in particular was signed by Mike Chapman, Joe 3 Sheets Neat, and Grog Males.
Oh wow! So you got like the big guns. You got like some of the heavy hitters to sign it. That's pretty impressive. I did not order a signed copy, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because this book is it's designed to be basically an artifact from in-universe, and this thing is sort of like finding the Dead Sea Scrolls of the Donkey Kong universe. And yes, the Donkey Kong universe, its reach extends beyond even the whole Sea of Thieves concept. So if you're one of those DK Viners who still hasn't been won over by Sea of Thieves, either because of the initial mainstream critical complaints, or because it doesn't star the familiar googly-eyed animal from your childhood, or if you're absolutely convinced that there's never going to be anything in Sea of Thieves that actually makes it part of the Donkey Kong universe, because whenever your parents played peekaboo with you, you actually thought they disappeared, then just keep listening to this show, this episode right here, because there are going to be some things in this book that might change your mind. So, like I said, it's designed to be an artifact from in-universe. So this is like holding a piece of the shared Rare universe in your hands. And
can I say they're very committed to the bit here with this, like just on the cover alone. Like you actually have like varied texture in the cover for like spots that are supposed to be worn. There's like speckles on it, which I suppose are supposed to be like saltware.
Yeah. Yeah, so well, it's basically a journal and ship ledger chronicling life in the Sea of Thieves from hundreds of years ago that has now somehow found its way into your hands. And aside from a single copyright and credit page in the very back of the book where they list, author credits, special thanks, copyright, whatever, the ISBN number, first edition, etc., and a small Titan Books printing on the bottom of the spine. Every part of this book is designed to feel like it's a tome from the game world.
And we do mean shoved to the back of the book, by the way. There is, on the first few pages, like no real-world author or publisher information at all. The book is credited, recorded, and compiled by Captain Flameheart.
Right. So, they, like you said, they're very committed to the bit. And not only do you have the cover with, like you said, the texture and the salt stains, but every page is artificially aged. Not in texture, unfortunately, but just in the colors of the printing used.
The pages are frayed, though.
Yeah, the pages are frayed, which is actually pretty common in the publishing world with, like, novels and stuff. Like, you'll see that in just contemporary books. I don't know if they've determined that it, like, feels better in one's hands, but whatever. But there's wear, tear, water stains, mold, and even blood splatters across the book. And I really wish they would have been able to have the budget to scent the book so it could smell really old, like an old comic book. I think that would help sell the illusion, but I completely understand why maybe that wasn't on the table. So I'm very meticulous with my possessions, Cameron. I don't know. I've never been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I don't think I actually have, and not to any great severity, but I have perfectionist tendencies, and that includes my prized possessions. I don't like any imperfections on them. But this is actually one book I almost wouldn't mind if I accidentally, say, creased a page or got a water stain on or something, because I feel like I would just be adding to its rich fictional legacy. And, because this is actually, presented to you as a physical piece of the shared rare universe. And it's in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean my hands. When I say my hands, I mean the character you, first appearing in It's Mr. Pants. Your avatar character in most contemporary Donkey Kong Universe games. If you own this book, it is you who somehow got their hands on it.
It'll be like how we hope a potential CT stopwatch in Sea of Thieves functions.
Yes, yeah, right. Personal canon and whatnot. But so the book is gorgeous. I mean, it's not like actually leather bound, which it makes me glad because I'm a vegetarian and I try to avoid leather products in general. I was buying new Xbox One earphones and a headset this week because I realized since we're streaming now, Sea of Thieves with their Stream of Thieves series, I needed a reliable one with a good microphone. So I was like looking through all the Turtle Beach headphones, and it's remarkable how many actually utilize leather in the head strap. And I looked and I looked until I found one that didn't. Yeah. So as a vegetarian who tries not to be a hypocrite, I am a hypocrite when it comes to my podcasting, of course, but as far as my lifestyle goes, I try to avoid leather when I can. So I was glad this book is just looks like leather but doesn't feel like it. Although I guess they could have sprung for pleather, but again, that would have just jacked the cost of the book up. And this is already going to be a hard sell to all but the most die-hard fans of this game.
Plus, I feel like, not being the material it initially appears to be is perfectly in tune with it being something owned by a pirate.
Sure, can leather petrify? Maybe that's what happened. The book itself is gorgeous, though, and I also appreciate that the actual, there's a strip that comes shrink wrapped, and there's a strip with the logo Tales from the Sea of Thieves and a description on the back that slides right off when you actually open it up, so it's not actually meant to be displayed with the book. So this is just like a book that came off a shelf from the Sea of Thieves. It actually looks a great deal like the books you'll see in the captain's quarters on ships in the game, so or in specific taverns. So I am enthralled with this, but let's actually talk about it, Cameron. What is the book all about? So from here on out, we should warn you, there are spoilers. So if you have any interest in actually picking up the book and being surprised, please stop listening at this point, go buy the book, and come back when you've read it. And I seriously, because there are some things in this book that will make you jump up, pump your fist in the air and go, hell yeah. Especially if you're a longtime fan of this nonsense like we are. So, the premise, like I said, it's a ship ledger. More accurately, starts off as a journal, and it was kept by a character who only refers to himself as Captain Flameheart, although other characters refer to him as Captain Faintheart, and maybe we should refer to him as that for now, just to keep it more clear, because he's a mealy-mouthed scholar whose father was the original Captain Flameheart, and following the father's retirement and death, the son, Faintheart, decides he's lived a far too sheltered life, and he wants to become a legendary pirate like his old man. So he sets out to rebrand himself as the new Captain Flameheart, paying others off to take him to the Sea of Thieves, where he becomes the captain of the ship, the Silver Blade.
Can I just say, as, people covering this from DK Vine, I, get a kick out of this book immediately starting with a son taking on the exact same moniker as his father, to everybody's confusion.
I'm sure there will be people out there who will argue, no, he's just the grandson, and there's a missing generation, or that the actual Captain Flameheart Jr. is missing, and this is Captain Flameheart III, it never fails. There's always ones out there who will argue this with you. Now, he's not the only author of this book, though. There are notations that were written in the margins by another pirate crew who found the journal after him, and there are 3 of them. There's Marisabel. I don't know how to pronounce it, really.
I just went with Marisabel.
Marisabel, okay. She's better known
I'm no
by
authority on it.
Yeah,
my last name is nonsense, so...
Yeah, my name is Hyle, so, yeah. She's better known by her pirate name, Diving Bell. She's the captain, never outright states she's the captain, but it's implied she's the captain of the ship, the Plundered Crown. And she's described as tall and thin, and I guess her gimmick, hence her name, is she's able to swim great distances, holding her breath for a prolonged period of time. So she's quite adept at exploring those shipwrecks and what have you.
I would also note, very few of these details are introduced in a fashion such as, hi, my name is, and this is what I look like. This is detail. These are details that are parceled out over time throughout the narrative that you kind of have to look for.
Yeah, you don't find out this information until you're more than 2/3 of the way through the book. Initially, these notations are just snarky nonsense, and you're just wondering.
It's just like a Statler and Waldorf heckling Captain Flameheart throughout.
It's Cranky Kong in the Donkey Kong Country instruction booklets. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you find it out very gradually and in a very organic way. You just have to kind of take the ride and know that you're not going to know everything as you start this out. So there's Nine Cat Nura, and she is the quartermaster of the Plundered Crown, and she also happens to be Belle's wife, which is this kind of this incidental detail that isn't hammered over your head. It's not like, oh wow, this is from the 1600s, but we actually have 2 women who are wife and wife. It's not treated like a big deal. It's just kind of there, matter-of-factly.
It's contextualized entirely through pronouns, names, and one reference to the word wife.
And they talk about their wedding a little bit too, but their wedding night. But it's nothing dirty. It's actually all tastefully done. But I like it. I like that just because Sea of Thieves is presented as kind of this very gender neutral, it's full of thieves and murderers and whatnot, but socially it's all very progressive. Everybody is an equal, and there are all kinds, and no strict social dogmas are placed on anybody.
Right. It kind of fits with the pirate code that Rare wrote with the community. The sea calls to us all.
Yeah. So I can see some people arguing, well, isn't that an historical anachronism? Not really. Not with this sliver of the world they're presenting. So it's a cool way to have kind of modern values imprinted on this different time. But anyway, so Nine Cat Nura, as well as Diving Bell, they were both raised in the Sea of Thieves. They were children when they were in the Sea of Thieves, born to pirates on different ships. And so she and Belle met when they were very young, and like I said, they eventually fell in love and then started their own crew on the Plundered Crown. I believe it makes reference to the fact that they came up with their ship name on their wedding day. So, and it's actually a reference to Diving Bell's parents. So, it just a lot of like lore within lore in this book, and I don't know if we'll ever actually encounter these characters in game, but it's just cool to have all this context for what were complete unknowns prior to opening the book. The third notation giver, who's less frequently seen, at least until the very end, is Half-Stew Jean. I think it's the French pronunciation.
Yeah, it's spelled Jean.
Yeah, so he is the cook of the Plundered Crown. He was actually formerly the cook of the Drowned Rat Tavern, which is in the game. And he was hired by Belle to work in their galley. And he is basically presented as the village idiot. Am I wrong with that takeaway?
At the very least, his writing, his skill with the pen isn't quite up to par with everyone else. You see a lot of spelling mistakes in his writing, and his handwriting is generally sloppier.
Yeah, all of his writing, which we'll get into later, is basically parceled out phonetically, so none of it is actually spelled correctly. You have to sound it out loud in order to understand what word he's trying to use, which I have to give props to Paul Davies or whoever conceptualized this, because they really had to commit to the bit. And it would have driven me crazy as a writer. The hardest part for me as a writer is always writing characters in their own voice and not just sounding like myself. The Aaron Sorkin problem. If you're a fan of any Aaron Sorkin TV or movies, they all sound like the same person. They're all hyper intelligent, quick as a wit, trading, intellectual banter, and nobody really has a unique voice. And that might be fine on a show like The West Wing, where everybody's presented as the best of the best, the brightest in their fields. But when you have a show like Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, it becomes ludicrous and obnoxious. So that's my biggest struggle as a writer, though, I will admit, is writing in somebody else's voice. So I have to give props to Paul Davies, or maybe Chris Alcock. I'm not sure. I have a hunch here and there what he contributed to the book, but whoever wrote all four of our authors did a very fine job making them all sound individualistic and unique.
Yeah,
so,
never once did I read like a passage written by a different character in the same voice. Like,
yeah, and generally...
pretty great.
Yeah, generally, unless they're writing the main passage, they write in their own color of ink or their own penmanship style. So it's helpful, but it's also nice that the writing backs it up. So the book, I think, definitely captures most of the aspects of playing Sea of Thieves. It's actually kind of a primer. If you read this before ever playing Sea of Thieves, you would get a good idea of what Sea of Thieves entails and a lot of the gameplay mechanics within. But it also sprinkles in a lot of backstory, legends, and further details that aren't provided directly in the game. And most intriguingly, I think, it also perhaps sets the stage for future in-game events and game expansions that we know are coming, because just the other week, Rare showed their game plan for the rest of 2018, and there's going to be a whole new region of the game world opening up. that joining the Shores of Plenty, the Ancient Isles, and the Wilds, there's going to be weekly events and things that transpire, new enemies, NPCs, all sorts of events are going to be happening in the game, and they could draw a lot from this book, and I have to assume that's partially the plan. Because we already are familiar with at least one of these characters in Captain Flameheart from their pre-release hype. So, we'll see.
There's also quite a bit of promotional artwork and sketches and, elements placed in the pages of these books that could not have been designed just to place in this book. They had to have been created during development, sussing out explorations of content, so...
Oh, absolutely. I think some of them actually match up with what's found in the art book. But, yeah, it kind of canonizes some of the things that didn't make it in the game yet. So, that's very cool to see. It also provides logistics for how some of the in-game mechanics work. Most importantly, I feel, coming back from the dead.
This is something I absolutely did not expect the book to touch on, was the Fairy of the Damned, in premise, seems like such a video gamey conceit that you wouldn't expect official lore to even touch on it, just allude to it maybe, but no, it actually is a part of the story in this.
Yeah, and, it's funny because I fan-wanked this ahead of reading the book, and it's pretty much one-to-one with my fan-wank, which I shared on Twitter, not even realizing it was in this book, which makes me feel kind of silly, because I was like, fan-wank corner or whatever, and actually I think it was Mitchell Wolf and Mamechi were asking on Twitter about... how you can come back from the dead in Sea of Thieves on a continual loop, but there are things like skellies in the game, so I just went into this long-winded rant, and it's actually here in the book, which is exciting. There's also a explanation for why you can't sail any further than the edge of the map in-game without your ship sinking, and it actually gives a name to the phenomena, which... I love, and we'll get into that in its own dedicated segment here in just a bit. So let's go over the broad plot real quick, Cameron. So we're not going to be touching upon...
Real quick, he says.
Okay. Real quick.
This is a very broad plot to go over.
It is a very broad plot, and it's more like a slice of life with this interconnected conspiracy kind of drawing out that... It's very much... It's a mystery without resolution, I guess you could say. And we're not going to be touching upon every single page and every little bit of nuance. We're not going to be talking about how Captain Flameheart or Faintheart, picked out his sails or anything.
Trying on his jacket and stuff like that.
Yeah, because there's this whole bit...
That is actually in there, by the way.
Yes. Commenting on the smells and whatnot, but we're not going to get into that. But we are going to go over any bits that we find especially intriguing, and of course anything that drives the story forward. So here is the broad plot, as it were. So, wishing to become more like his father, the legendary pirate Captain Flameheart, who left him a large inheritance and a vast estate in what I presume is the English countryside. It's never really specified where this takes place pre-coming to the Sea of Thieves, but I presume it's somewhere in Great Britain. A scholar seeks to leave his life of privilege behind to become a pirate on the Sea of Thieves. So, first, and most importantly, he has to find it. And its location is a carefully guarded secret. Now, Cameron, I love that the implication that the Sea of Thieves and the Rare Archipelago, by extension, is kept secret. They mention, like, a trading company spy or something trying to suss it out. And we already know there are trading companies operating within the Sea of Thieves. So I kind of took this to be an oblique reference to the East India Company, which, was infamously a huge trading company around this time period. And I like this idea that the world's biggest trading company would be looking for the Sea of Thieves, and all of these pirates and rogues and scoundrels would be trying to keep it a secret from them, and so they can never exploit it. That just appeals so much to my own understandings of the Rare Archipelago, dating back to, when it was just like Donkey Kong Island. I had this notion that it was this island that existed on Earth, but for whatever reason had never been officially discovered by human society.
Yeah, it gives you so much leeway for world building.
It does. Not just for Sea of Thieves, but for the entire shared universe, which I love. So, Flameheart Jr., should we refer to him as Faintheart for now? Because I feel like it's just going to get confusing.
Yeah, I think we should just stick to Faintheart, which is what Belle and Nura mockingly call him for pretty much the duration of the book.
At least the early part of the book, yeah. That is what they call him. So he hits the port towns near his home, presumably, like I said, somewhere in the British Isles, to chat up sailors and also the legitimate pirates who are hanging about, kind of to integrate himself in the lifestyle, to kind of get a feel for what it's like to rub shoulders with these people. But he's also looking for a crew willing to help him sail to the Sea of Thieves. And upon chatting with these pirates, one of these pirates tells the story of how he won his ship in the Sea of Thieves. And this is one bit of the book that we're going to have to read verbatim, Cameron.
Would you like me to do the honors?
Why don't you have the honors?
I had to leave my heritage behind, taking only my soul to bear at the drinking table. I must say that this has been the hardest research that anyone can undertake, akin to the longest game of 21 imaginable. Fortune dealt me a very strong hand in life in terms of financial security and moral upbringing, but ultimately, it was my true worth that was being judged by these pirates. This is the person that you will only find reflected in the bottom of a glass at 5 a.m., in the last wakeful compartment of your brain that speaks from the bottom of the heart. It was to this person, the real man, that the hardiest of seafarers finally shared their tales of how they and their ships first met. Each became more improbable than the last, such as the tale of the fellow who won his ship during a bet with its original owner, a swimming race to a nearby island. While the captain was thus distracted, his crew were rounded up and his vessel seized by the time he returned, soggy and triumphant, if only momentarily. The last story was authenticated by the cackle of a man whose name I politely asked, but received only the darkest of one-eyed glares in response. I later felt better about the offhand dismissal after hearing his name banded fearfully among the crowd. Captain Black-Eye.
Oh, here we are. Alright, so Captain Black-Eye is hanging out in this portside tavern somewhere in England. Maybe somewhere near what eventually became the location of Ghoulhaven Hall, if Ghoulhaven Hall wasn't already there. Now, we know so far in Sea of Thieves that Captain Black-Eye personally owns a clothing shop. I forget on which outpost it is that mentions Captain Black-Eye is the owner or manager of it. But this further links him as someone who is occasionally active there, but maybe not at the time this passage was written. So it's Captain Black-Eye is somebody who maybe comes and goes from the Sea of Thieves, which I think sets the stage, Cameron, for his eventual emergence at some future point in the game. Because a lot of people are saying, Hyle, fuck you. You promised us, you assured us there was no way that Captain Black-Eye was not going to be in this game. He was going to be there, and he's not. This game is not part of the shared universe. DK Vine should not cover it. Go, I don't know, go hang yourself in shame, you fraud. And to that I say, patience! Patience! look at the signs. Captain Black Eye is obviously being built up as something.
It's nice that we have to reconcile that Faint Heart fears, the crowd is fearful of Captain Black Eye, who we up until now have known as like a seasick, clumsy slob sitting in jollies.
So he goes from this feared pirate to Norm from Cheers, and that's exciting. That maybe we'll see that transition play out. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll get a whiff of a bear stealing his glory. I don't know. Maybe
we just caught him on a bad day in Banjo-Tooie.
Well, no, he was clearly like washed up, and his glory. Now, granted, I mean, for a guy who's over 300 years old, he was doing pretty good for himself. But all the same, yeah, I like that Sea of Thieves represents Captain Black Eye's height, his
prime.
Time. It's like Al Bundy. On the high school football team. This is his era that he looks back wistfully on. So, this is, I initially just, like, flipped through the book before I sat down to read it, and so this passage I did not know about until you mentioned it to me, and, when I actually came to it in the book, oh my god, it actually got chills just because the fanboy in me was squeeing with delight. So, Faint Heart remembers that he has an ancient coin passed down to him by his father. And it never outright states it, but it's presumed to be from the civilization that lived in the Ancient Isles region. So, he uses it to obtain the services of a man. How do you pronounce this dude's name? Is it Isidro?
I don't want the liability for this. We're gonna just murder this man's name, and
Isidro. I like Isidro. Isidro, who helps procure him a galleon and a crew, all because this is such a valuable coin that this Faint Heart immediately earns, if not their respect, then at least their tentative loyalty to. Okay, we'll get you a ship. We'll sell you to the Sea of Thieves. We don't want to exactly tell you where it is because we don't really trust you, but we'll get you there. So, included in the crew is Red Rosie, who is referenced at least one point in the book serving as the quartermaster, and Tomas, who is supposedly very young. They never outright state how young he is, but I was picturing somebody at the very least in their early teens. And together they make up the crew of the Silver Blade. And then they set sail for the Sea of Thieves. So it's at this point where they describe the crossing into the Sea of Thieves. And I think this would be a good point to mention the Devil's Shroud and what is brought to the table with that concept. So in the book, Faint Heart is asleep when they make the voyage into the Sea of Thieves, so he completely misses it. But he mentions how the stars seem to be different. And there is this concept called the Devil's Shroud, and it's presented in the book as this mist that surrounds the Sea of Thieves, and it kind of ebbs and flows, comes and goes into different parts of it, but essentially it keeps sailors from within the Sea of Thieves unless you know the specific coordinates to navigate your way inward. Kind of like the island on Lost, now that I think about it. Unless you know the specific coordinates, you cannot get into the Sea of Thieves, and should you want to just merrily sail your way out, you can't, because there's a phenomenon known as the Devil's Shroud, which will basically immediately sink your ship. Your ship will start to buckle, it'll take on water, and no matter how much you bail and how much you patch, it will eventually sink, which in-game is exactly what happens when you pass beyond the map. And if you actually look at the map, you'll see that mist represented on the map table.
Yeah, this was an interesting part to encounter because the Devil's Shroud also comes up in the Sea of Thieves comic book, so it's...
Really? Okay.
You've got synergy between this book, the comic, and the game itself.
So I have not... I shamefully have only parsed through the first one. I have the second. I have not read it. So I figure I'm going to wait until all the issues are out before we discuss the Sea of Thieves comic. But that's interesting that there is synergy, and that just goes to show you the great work that everybody at Rare is doing. Adam Park, Pete Hentz, Mike Chapman, Chris Alcock, about keeping all this canon straight in all of the material. So, the Devil's Shroud. Now, there's no explanation offered for the Devil's Shroud, and I think, you could interpret it to be a natural phenomenon like the Bermuda Triangle, but I take it to be something that kind of keeps the Sea of Thieves secret and also keeps perhaps pirates, unless they know the specific coordinates, stuck in that lifestyle. And I would have to imagine it's the doing of the Pirate Lord, who we'll discuss in a bit. But
it feels like one of those things that's meant to be like an either or, like ambiguous, believe what you want to believe sort of thing. Maybe magic, maybe mundane sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, what I'm not sure of from my own fandom and from my own personal continuity chronicling is if the Devil's Shroud encompasses the entire Rare archipelago. Isle o' Hags, Willow Woods, Timbers Island, yes, Donkey Kong Island, etc. That would at least provide an explanation.
Explain all those crashed ships around Crocodile Isle.
Yeah, it might give some context to Lost Mangroves, too, in Tropical Freeze. At this point, I'm only willing to commit to it being around the Sea of Thieves, which is something what we've conceptualized as the Western Rare Archipelago as you head out to the closer to the Americas. But I'm willing and game to accept almost anything at this point because so much lore about the Rare Shared Universe is potentially on the table with Sea of Thieves that it's an exciting time to be a fan of all of this. And I love the concept of the Devil's Shroud, and I love how it's another in-game mechanic that they give an explanation for, a mysterious explanation for. I hate sailing off the map. It's one of my biggest fears in-game, Cameron, when I'm sailing by myself, is I'm petrified of, becoming absent-minded and sailing to the point where the skies will turn red and that eerie music starts playing. I don't want it to happen. So the fact that it now has a greater context, and I mean, my fan wank was, it's the Pirate Lord keeping you into the Sea of Thieves, but I love that we have even greater articulation for what it is now. So anyway, so after arriving in the Sea of Thieves, the crew of the Silver Blade heads for an outpost where a series of complicated and mysterious events transpire that leads them astray. So, basically, Faintheart decides to sail to the wilds to look for a mysterious treasure. He's prompted by an old woman who vaguely smells of incense and has arm tattoos. Now, the book never really went into it, but her description made her sound like, to me, to be a member of the Order of Souls. But it's left purposely vague.
Yeah, it is, and they do establish in the book that the trading companies in-game do exist in this book. If I recall, he goes after this quest from the mysterious woman after initially taking one from one of the gold hoarders.
Right.
Like, he's initially just, going to do a simple find the gold quest, and then gets sidetracked by this mystery.
Yeah, and it's a mystery that will only deepen and get even more confusing as the book goes on. So I don't really want to try to analyze it too much because I don't think we can.
don't think we're really meant to.
No, at least not at this point in time. Now, additionally, while they're at the outpost, a strange cat happens to encounter them and instantly bonds with Isidro. So they decide to take it aboard, and they name it Trouble the Cat. And I like that this is a tip of the hat to the future pets that we'll be able to have in-game. That actually, Joe Neat has come out and said they've delayed for the foreseeable future because they want to fix the critical perception of Sea of Thieves at the moment, and having microtransactions will not do that any favors. So they're focusing more on rolling out more expansive content rather than fun little things like getting to have a pet cat or, much to my chagrin, a monkey butler. But yeah, Trouble the Cat. And Trouble is one of those aspects that's left vague. What I like about this book, Cameron, is things aren't very cut and dry. We're seeing all these events play out through the eyes of these characters. So there's a lot of superstition, a lot of fear. Trouble the Cat may just be a red herring, as it were. He may just be there to further stoke the superstition that sets in as they set out on these bizarre series of events. But it's also possible Trouble the Cat was sent by this old woman, this member of the Order of Souls, to further provoke, trouble. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll get to a bit of that later, I believe.
Yes. Now, there are interludes among the main narrative where, Faint Heart describes history of the Sea of Thieves. And I would be remiss and not at all self-aggrandizing if I were to skip over the passage entitled The First Battle.
I think for reasons that should soon become apparent, you should take this one, huh?
Oh, I was going to say, because I'm so humble, you should read it, but okay. All right. The First Battle. So this is another passage I am reading verbatim, with apologies to Titan Books. All right. Like so many tales relayed to me in my journey across the Sea of Thieves, details of the confrontations and skirmishes that filled the first days of this region are lavishly decorated with embellishment and exaggeration, the unsullied facts of the event all too often lost in the murk of a rum-filled tankard. One particularly unpleasant individual waylaid me with his own account. He had seen, or so he claimed, the legendary pirate lord setting sail on his maiden voyage. The scallywag became extraordinarily offended when I questioned the veracity of his story, given his obvious youth and inexperience. In fact, our heated exchange might have come to blows had his parents not then called him indoors for his supper. That said, those formative years remain of significant cultural interest to those of us whose purview stretches beyond the barrel of a blunderbuss. And having researched the matter diligently, I can state the earliest significant battle to have been recorded, impartially, was a 2-day, 3-crew skirmish between more than a dozen young pirates. Having toiled hard and used all of their ingenuity and guile to reach the Sea of Thieves ahead of their peers, these aspiring louts, many of whom, it is believed, had encountered each other in the past, wasted no time in inquiring 3 fine vessels: the Mermaid's Fortune, the Mad Monkey, and the Serpent's Lie. One can only imagine the trembling hands that first unfurled the sails of those proud galleons, and I'm told that the inexperience of these young men and women nearly ended their conflict before it had gotten started. The crew of the Mermaid's Fortune elected to bolster their resolve with so much grog that even boarding their vessel caused a number of cuts and bruises, while crewman Dreadswords, who would go on to be a pirate of some renown, was inadvertently and noisily marooned by his own shipmates. Nonetheless, once all 3 ships were underway, some combination of nervousness, pride, or overexcitement compelled the crews to seek each other out and trade cannon fire without even taking time to hoist their respected liveries. Blows were struck, as often by luck as by prowess, as the ships came together, exchanged fire, and then limped away for hasty repair. The series of set-tos lasted for 2 long days, drawing many onlookers and hopeful plunderers to the scene. Some I spoke to suggested that even the fabled Grog Males was spotted observing the battle, though that stretches the credulity of this humble scholar. Word began to spread that victory would inevitably be claimed by the Mermaid's Fortune, and, furthermore, that the Serpent's Lie and the Mad Monkey now sought to negotiate a parley. The sunset of the second day saw the cannons fall silent and the exhausted pirates assembled at the Thieves' Haven Tavern, ready to settle their quarrel over a pint of grog. While the defeated crews raised their glasses in a toast to the Mermaid's Fortune's prowess, they consumed nothing and made merry only until their adversaries had drained their drinks. Leaving the would-be victors tipsy and distracted, the 2 crews took to their heels and headed for the tiny port where their vessels were docked. They unloaded shot after shot into the defenseless Mermaid's Fortune, while a crew watched impotently from the shore, swearing revenge on the treacherous braggarts who'd marooned them. It doesn't take a scholar of human nature to predict what the course of events. No sooner had the wreck of the Mermaid's Fortune vanished beneath the waves than the crews of the Mad Monkey and the Serpent's Lie were once again at each other's throats, carried out of sight in a flurry of cannon fire and threats. Details of what happened next, or if either crew survived, are almost impossible to come by. Still, the lesson of this first fateful encounter rings true to this day. Be wary of those with whom you choose to share a drink. So, if it wasn't clear, that's actually entirely a reference to the E3 2016 trailer and the trip to Rare as a whole that Chad McKenna and I participated in. And Crewman Dreadswords, by the way, is an explicit reference to Mike Edwards of Pirate Port Radio. And so, yeah, that's, I believe Chris Alcock did a great deal of contributing here, if his Twitter hints are any indication. But, yeah, that's, I didn't expect to see that in the book. And, by the way, the DK Vine boys, Chad and myself, we were portrayed as part of the Mermaid's Fortune in the trailer, having the Medusa-like skull emblem associated with us, which, by the way, that skull emblem of the Medusa is on the back of the book as well. So I don't know what the significance of that in universe now is, if that's like because that was the first victorious crew on the sea, or semi-victorious, I guess. But I believe the reference to us outgunning the other 2 crews is because Chad and I did end up winning the contest to sink the most ships in the game. And that's pretty weird to consider given how pacifistic I tend to play the game nowadays. But also the reference to us being so drunk we could barely board the ship is taken directly from the trailer as well. So that was pretty cool.
No ruminations on the subject of water, though.
No. My most famous line from that trailer, unfortunately, is left unmentioned. Now, the implications of our E3 2016 trailer becoming some sort of quasi-canon or legend, what does that mean? Well, I'm not really sure yet. All I can say for sure is my current pirate character in the game, who I associate as Cousin Russell, could not be that pirate, because I was playing as a different pirate, just one of the models Rare provided. So the way I interpret it, at least at this point in time, it's pending to change upon further information. But I view it as that version of me from the trailer is actually a relation to Cousin Russell, either maybe the father, maybe it's a flame heart, faint heart situation, or grandfather, depending on how far back it goes. But Yeah, he's an ancestor of my current pirate. So that's the way I'm viewing it, but I don't know if all the others, the more than a dozen referred to in the passage, would agree with me on that. But that's pretty cool. So thank you to Chris Alcock if it was indeed you who was responsible for getting that in there. Now, I did not contribute anything personally to the book, and neither did you, Cameron. There were fan contributions, though, written by some people, I believe, on the Sea of Thieves forum. And in the context of the book, before leaving for the Sea of Thieves, Faintheart chronicled some pirates' direct accounts of battles that took place within that region of ocean. And, like I said, these were taken from technical alpha experiences written by actual gamers. And to give you an example, we'll present to you one verbatim.
So we've got ourselves a legendary chest from this island, and we're hauling away, and we see this other ship as we're preparing to go. So what I do is I jump into the water and start swimming after this boat. This boat full of scurvy vermin start to size up our ship. As it sails toward our ship at full speed, I manage to cling onto the ropes and climb up, with not much health, mind you. Expecting death, I find myself in the presence of 3 crew members facing away from me, ready to blow holes in my crew's ship. So, I quickly jump into the middle deck, and then climb up the stairs, only to find that my crew's ship is passing very closely by, side by side,
exchanging glorious cannon fire. I dispatch all 3 of the scurvy dogs with a combination of pistol and blunderbuss. I run up towards the captain's wheel, and he has ignored me. So, I blast his brains out from behind as well. Not bad. I've just managed to murder all of the enemy crew. Anyway, I drop their anchor and search for any loot on their ship. But alas, none can be found. Captain Scraps.
So yeah, obviously that belonged to Captain Scraps, better known as frequent Kongversation caller and DK Vine forum moderator, Scraps69. That's very cool. They only picked, like 3 or 4 entries out of everybody, and Scraps is one of them. So a little part of DK Vine did get into the book as in that form as well. So bravo, Scraps, and your character, your pirate character, Captain Scraps, is now elevated above ours in this book. So congrats. All right, so Faintheart, back to the actual narrative at hand. Faintheart, he and his crew on the Silver Blade arrive to the wilds, and they find this mysterious island. And so they arrive. They find the tree that's marked on the treasure map, and they dig up a mysterious chest. But immediately they have this inclination that the chest might be cursed. And so they take it back to the ship, getting a little superstitious about things. And then after some time, they're fired upon by another ship. And Faintheart becomes overwhelmed, and because this is his first battle, and he's kind of a weakling. He's not used to this lifestyle, so he.
This is a very relatable section of the book, by the way.
I mean, this happens to me in game, yeah. So I'm somebody who tries to avoid the fight whenever possible. So Faintheart, getting intimidated by the cannon fire, not wanting to man one himself. Copping to the fact that he would probably just make matters worse, sees that the wheel is unmanned, and so he runs up and grabs it, and I think is presented, this is actually his first time at the wheel. Despite being presented as captain, he's never actually taken the wheel. So he's got the wheel, he's trying to get away. He sees mist in the distance and thinks, hey, we won't be able to see anything, but at least the ship won't be able to see us either. I'm going to go hide in that mist. Turns out, though, Faintheart, it's the Devil's Shroud he's going into, like an idiot. And
his
the
crew
ship,
calls him out on this, by the way.
Yes, they are not happy. The ship starts to sink, and they're all forced to abandon it. Faintheart makes note of the chest, the potentially cursed chest that he locked in the brig, that's now like floating in water. They leave that behind, but they grab as many provisions and supplies as they can, including the cat, Trouble the cat. He's safe, and they eventually wash back ashore to the very island that they got the chest from in the first place. So they're stranded for several days, and they eventually decide to go exploring. And when they go exploring, they find a riddle. And the riddle's never read to us, which I found a little weird. But nonetheless, the riddle basically leads them to an underground cavern system. And inside the cavern is a pool of mysterious water and a golden chalice. And yeah, if you've ever seen Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, you know this can't be a good thing. So they all decide to drink from the fresh water with the chalice, and they keep relating that it seems like the chalice never empties, that it's always filled, overflowing with this water. And that's when things start to get very disorienting.
They mention, like, ever since they started doing this, little vague hints, like even though nobody's eaten in several days, they're kind of content. They're not feeling very hungry. They think it's just they're getting used to starving. Their eyes are acclimating to the cavern, the darkness.
Yeah, even though there's like no light at all. Yes, I didn't even realize that. So they're led down through multiple archways in this cavern system over the course of several days, descending further and further downward, all the more drinking from this chalice, and feeling like surprisingly strong and healthy and determined, despite the fact that they haven't rested, they haven't stopped. They're just kind of in this fugue state, very disoriented. Even the writing style of Faintheart, which up to this point was very refined and proper, if sometimes a little nervous, became very aloof, like the way I feel when I'm trying to write a DK Vine Facebook post at, say, 2 in the morning.
The prose gets a bit less flowery, I'd say.
Yeah, it becomes almost dreamlike, I would say. And so they're obviously in some sort of trance. They're under some sort of spell. And as it turns out, as Faintheart realizes, by the point it's too late, their bodies are actually decaying. They're being turned into skellies. By the way, I should point out, too, mostly in the book they're referred to as skeletons, but at one point they are referred to as skellies, I think by the crew of the Plundered Crown. So I like that it does canonize Skelly as a proper nickname for them among pirates. Somebody like Faintheart would only refer to them as skeletons, or maybe skeleton men, or, something prim and proper like that. But I do like that Skellies, which was used by Rare prior to Sea of Thieves actually coming out, is still very much in play. Because I am on the Skelly or for life train. I ride or die with the Skelly vernacular. I don't like skeletons. Skeletons are what's in Grab by the Ghoulies. Skellies are in Sea of Thieves. Alright, so eventually they come to the end of the cavern tunnels, and they meet a Skelly who's just called the Cap'n.
It's spelled like Cap'n Crunch.
Yes. CAP''N. The Cap'n apparently was, if not the mastermind behind this, somebody who took advantage of the situation. He makes them all swear allegiance to him, which they do in short order now that they are Skellies themselves. This is the last... Oh.
The cup seems to have, enthralled them to him. I think it's pretty heavily implied he left that there for them to find. And
yes.
Faintheart seems to be the only one who's retaining some semblance of agency.
Yeah, but even he's basically ready to, I guess, let go of himself and become subservient to the captain. So this is the last entry written in the book by Faintheart. Or Flameheart, is it? Because there's kind of a mystery here. So we know there's a picture on this last page of Flameheart as we know him, as we saw him in statue form at E3 2016. Now, the question I have is Captain Flameheart, the scholar we've been following, who now fully becomes a Skelly and becomes Flameheart truly, could Flameheart actually be the deceased father? Or could Flameheart be this entity known as the Captain, who takes the Flameheart name for himself? It's left purposely vague, frustratingly so, and we're not really sure who Flameheart the Skelly that we all know actually is. So what do you think, Cameron?
I mean, I'm inclined to believe it's the author of the book. I mean, I don't know how much of that is just because I want it to be true, because I would kind of love the fact that before reading this, and this is one of the reasons I've really gotten to like this book, Flameheart, we've known him solely from artwork, essentially. We've kind of only even found out his name through bits and pieces, and the press release for his Loot Crate thing, and excerpts from this book. And with only that information, you'd get the impression that he's just sort of another scowling baddie. And this gives much. If this story applies to him, it gives him a much, much greater degree of depth than I would have ever expected from a character who looks almost like a pirate version of Ghost Rider, which I guess is also appropriate because there's more to that character than you initially cotton on to.
Yeah. Like being Nicolas Cage.
It also explains if he got skeletonized sometime as a younger man, rather than just dying of old age and being resurrected, why his beard is still black.
That's a good point. Yeah, it would provide pathos to the Flameheart character, because as much as we've ragged on this author up until this point, you do kind of grow to root for him a little bit, because you want him to succeed in his dream of becoming a legitimate pirate. And the fact that he fails so spectacularly and so tragically, it does provide a deep tragedy in the book. And the fact that this is basically the last appearance he makes in the book was kind of shocking to me. I wasn't expecting him to exit right here. And I thought maybe we would see him continue to write in the journal, maybe as a skeleton man, but he doesn't. He's gone. This is it. He's lost himself, and from this point on, the book is taken over by Diving Bell, who, up until this point, was just writing in the margins of the book, of the pages, but at this point, she becomes the main author of the passages in the book.
Right. And in universe, this is because it was a blank journal when Flameheart got it, and by the time he stopped writing, there were still empty pages left.
Right. So basically, Diving Bell finds the journal in a skeleton's hand on the very island shore many years, possibly decades later. It's kind of left vague, but it is implied that what happened to Flameheart happened years ago at this point, and many months and years and potentially decades have passed between Flameheart's last entry and Diving Bell picking up the book. Now, the skeleton she found, or the Skelly. Well, maybe a Skelly. The skeleton may have only been plain dead. that was holding the journal, because the corpse vanishes later on when Belle goes looking for it. So I think it's supposed to be implied that this was Faintheart, the scholar, still active and roaming the island as a Skelly. I don't know, though. Again, it's left as a mystery, and Belle never really gets the answer. So maybe another Skelly got their hands on it, or maybe, who knows. But for whatever the case, Diving Belle was on this island, because it turns out that this island in the wilds was one that Belle and Nura, who again was her wife and the quartermaster of the ship, they were taken to by their parents as kids many times. And they had a lot of training sessions and trials on this island. They played on the beach, and they have a lot of fond memories of it. So the island, I guess, presumably vanished at some point, and it was possibly claimed by the Devil's Shroud, but the Devil's Shroud, the way it's presented in the book, it kind of rescinds. It kind of comes and goes from various points.
Yeah,
so,
there are islands mentioned to have left the Shroud and then been enveloped by the Shroud, so it's treated as kind of like a moving storm a little bit.
Which is kind of a clever way of dealing with when Rare expands the game world, because what will happen? The Devil's Shroud will roll back and reveal more map, more terrain in the Sea of Thieves. It actually mentions that the Shores of Plenty, I believe, were the most recent part of the island, the Sea of Thieves, that were unclaimed by the Devil's Shroud. So it's the part of the island chain that is the newest.
Yeah, the part that looks like the most untouched by man.
So, yeah, that's interesting. And anyway, so I guess when they were sailing, she saw this island and thought, that's the island from our childhood. So anyway, Belle's intrigued by Faintheart's story, and so she swims to the ruins of the Silver Blade, which are still underneath the waves, and she recovers the cursed chest from the brig, right where Faintheart left it. And then she's picked back up by her ship, the Plundering Crown, and the question becomes, what do we do with this possibly cursed chest that might have contributed to the ill fortune of this crew many, many years ago? So one interesting aspect is they recognize that it has mermaid, or merfolk, I guess, as the more proper term. It has merfolk writing on it. So the merfolk writing says, do not open, and it's surmised that this whole chest was a merfolk chest, or had merfolk maybe placed a curse on it, or the merfolk has some sort of connection to this chest. And as a child, Belle found merfolk earrings underneath the water that actually allows her to communicate in the merfolk language, which apparently is something that most people cannot do. So she knows of a merfolk congregation spot near Golden Sands Outpost, and she decides they should head there and ask them about the chest. So let's talk a little bit about what the book brings up about the merfolk, Cameron. So right now in Sea of Thieves, all of the mer people do is they provide a way back to your ship should you fall overboard, or should you need quick passage back. And they're just kind of an instant teleportation mechanic. They are the cauldrons of Sea of Thieves, or the jam jar silos, or the banana ports, whatever you want to say. But the book makes specific reference to the fact that there's much more to the merfolk society than this. There are merfolk temples underneath the water. There are merfolk civilizations that do much more than just help out pirates. And it does get into the whole notion that merfolk and pirates are bonded, probably because of the ancient civilization that lived in the ancient isles, striking up some sort of relationship with them that's long lost but the merfolk still honor by helping pirates.
It's also worth mentioning, I don't know that this is necessarily brought up in the book, but the pictures that we've mentioned, the artwork that's sometimes decorates the pages, we see merfolk that like look a bit less humanoid than the friendly merfolk we find in the game. Like they look a bit more like Abe Sapien from Hellboy is what they look like to me.
Yeah, they look like basically fish people, but not like the sexy version of a mermaid that's like the traditional sailor fantasy. They look like the manatee that mermaid sightings probably actually were. They look, the fish part is on top as well as on bottom, but they have like humanoid proportions. And it you know, what this suggests, I don't know. It could be that perhaps the merfolk that deal with the pirates and do the favors for them are the ones who look more humanoid, while the ones who are more fish-like prefer to stay in the deeps. Or maybe that over time all merfolk eventually become more fish-like. I don't know. It does make me question what we thought we knew about Pearl and Donkey Kong 64, the mermaid who helped out who Tiny Kong helped out, who gave Tiny Kong a gold banana, and also that we saw statues that resembled her in Banjo-Tooie's Atlantis, and I have hypothesized that the underwater civilization that we see in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze belongs to those same mermaids. And it makes me wonder if they're part of the same like mermaid society, and maybe Pearl is somebody on the extreme end of the I look basically like a human except with a fishtail, on the very opposite end of the spectrum from these very, very fish-like mermaids that are depicted in this book. And yes, I know I'm trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. I don't care. That's what I do. I'm going to link Pearl to the Sea of Thieves pirates, whether it kills me or not. But anyway, yeah, it's very intriguing, and I'm honestly fascinated to learn more about the merfolk in Sea of Thieves. They actually almost have a sinister edge to them that isn't currently there. Because the merfolk are terrified of the chest when Belle takes it to them. They want nothing to do with it. They kind of scowl and hiss and demand her to be gone, and they leave. So
yeah, the very next passage of this book has them just trying to hawk this thing to whoever in light of their experience with the merfolk.
Yeah. That's something that like I never got from the mermaids in Sea of Thieves thus far, because they've just been the friendly, benevolent, I'm here to help you back to your ship, I'm your buddy. But to know there's a lot more to their society, and all of it might not be good. The fact that they're dealing in very, very cursed chests, and then I don't know.
We also get like details of like a nice ceremony between them, and just like we get a glimpse of mermaid society in this, like just enough to stoke the fire, as it were, but not enough to get like a clear picture of it all. There's room for this to grow.
And by the way, I realize the mermaid in Donkey Kong 64, who we call Pearl, does speak English to Tiny Kong. So I would presume it would mean that merfolk are capable of learning languages spoken by others, but most of them just speak in their own native tongue. Yes, I've already fan-wanked it. So, the merfolk, like I said, they didn't want anything to do with the chest. And so Belle decides that the best course of action to take with this mysterious, possibly cursed, dangerous artifact is to find a way to pawn it off, to sell it to some sucker or another, so her crew can be rid of it. So they kind of take off. They go about. It's mentioned that they're going to check out some sort of major battle that happened in the wilds and maybe like plunder it. On the 19th day of Belle writing in the journal, their ship is attacked by 2 smuggler ships, who they think is smuggler ships at first. But what we later find out is part of a bounty hunting group of pirates called the Twisted Knife. And they're led by a pirate named Cole. And so they have to fight both ships off. Cameron, one of the ships, is given a name because Belle sees the plaque on the ship, and it is the Salty Hippo. So they sink both ships, and they take Cole prisoner. But what are the implications about the Salty Hippo, Cameron? I mean, my God.
Well, here's the curious thing. The Salty Hippo is name-dropped and then immediately sunk. Do we reconcile this as the same ship knowing that? Or is it the namesake? Is this just a very common name used in the Sea of Thieves? I'm at a loss here, Hyle. I defer to you on this one.
There's one of 2 possibilities here, Cameron. That the Salty Hippo was a legendary ship, helmed by bounty hunters of the Twisted Knife. And when Captain Blubber, many, many decades, centuries later, became a pirate, which is something he always wanted to do, as we saw in Banjo-Kazooie Grunny's Revenge. He had his own little pirate club when he was a kid in 1978. Captain Blubber, he might have been inspired by the Salty Hippo, being a hippo who loves the salt water, and he named it in honor of that famous ship. There's that possibility. There's also the possibility that somehow the Salty Hippo was recovered by the Twisted Knife, somehow repaired, and I don't know how you would possibly get a shipwreck up from the depths. Nothing in Sea of Thieves so far has ever portrayed that being as a remote possibility.
Do you think Captain Blubber was a bounty hunter? Is that how he got the gold?
I don't think... Well, no, that's not possible, because we saw Captain Blubber as a kid in Grunny's Revenge, which it was, again, 1978. So, no.
We don't know how long the Twisted Knife carried on.
Yeah, that's true. I mean... Perhaps he joined up with them. I see what you're saying. I thought maybe you were saying Blubber was over 300 years old like Black Eye. So I haven't really settled on one side or another if the Salty Hippo came back from this, and that's eventually the ship that Blubber crashed himself on Treasure Trove Cove, which, by the way, we know is somewhere in the Sea of Thieves. It's probably covered... No, it's most definitely covered by the Devil's Shroud at the moment, but potentially we'll surface at some point. I don't know. But yeah, the Salty Hippo. Either it was the namesake for Blubber's ship, or is actually Blubber's ship. So that's a little bit more Donkey Kong universe world building there. Wasn't expecting the Salty Hippo to be name dropped. That's for damn sure.
No.
So, all right. So Cole is taken prisoner. Captain Cole of the Twisted Knife is taken prisoner. So they kind of limp along to the wilds after that point. They're kind of rattled by their fight with the bounty hunters. Belle is furious that the fight happened at all. And they eventually are able to interrogate Cole and learn that he's in the employ of a mysterious patron, the same man who hired the old woman, potentially, to approach Faintheart's crew all of those years ago. And this mysterious man, this mysterious patron, this mysterious benefactor, has been after this particular treasure chest for quite some time. We never get any inclination of who he is, what he's about, but yeah, there's this unseen figure who's pulling the strings. And so at this point, the crew is starting to become a little paranoid and sullen. They believe this chest is cursed, and that they're basically inviting misfortune the more they go on. Belle doesn't really know what course of action to take. She's a little lost. At this point, the entries in the journal become much, much shorter and a little bit more brusque as she's kind of just going day by day trying to come up with a strategy. So eventually they decide the best course of action is to somehow track down this mysterious man behind all of these events dating back to Faintheart and give him the fucking chest and just rid their hands of it entirely. So, unwisely, she decides to utilize Cole for this, letting him out of the brig and helping him navigate. On day 25, a kraken is sighted in the distance, attacking a merchant ship. On day 26, the kraken attacks the crew of the plundered crown. And it's surmised that the chest itself is letting out a high-pitched signal that is actually used to attract the kraken. Because all throughout the book, whenever the chest is mentioned, occasionally characters will make a reference to they think the chest is making a noise or it's talking to them, and then they kind of shrug it off as just their imagination running wild. But at this point, it's kind of speculated, but almost for certain, like known by the characters, that somehow this chest brought the kraken forth. I don't know again how much of this is superstition or how much of it is just actual concrete fact, but I like the ambiguity here that maybe this is why the kraken attacked, or maybe the kraken just attacked because there's fucking krakens in the Sea of Thieves. I don't know. But they do survive the encounter because they drop the chest in the water. It sinks, and they just let it go. Interesting, the chest sinks because most chests in Sea of Thieves float. So this is a chest that actually is heavy enough that sinks. I don't know if that suggests its contents in any way, but I don't know. But unfortunately, the kraken attack has left their ship essentially crippled. It's taking on water. They're patching and hauling out the water with buckets, but eventually they will sink. So at this time, Cole becomes more of a crew member, and because they have to utilize him to basically keep the ship afloat. And he actually starts to befriend Half-Stew Jean, the chef, just a little bit. And they actually slowly start to trust Cole, which is, again, you can see where this goes wrong. They try to patch their ship with goods that they recover from the downed merchant ship, and they send Cole to the merchant ship to retrieve it, but he's gone for an awfully long time. Well, as it turns out, he's used the opportunity to escape from the watch of Belle and Nura to regroup with the Twisted Knife. And they all conspire with Half-Stew Jean to poison the crew, to knock them unconscious with the food he serves them. And so the next day, they find that they've been taken hostage by the Twisted Knife, who are now on board the ship. And it's actually kind of a little bit mortifying, the next passage, because Belle is locked in the captain's quarters, her captain's quarters, and you can hear, I guess, her crew being forced to walk the plank. You can hear the sound of them being dunked, and the Twisted Knife jeering menacingly as they drown. And it's outright stated that Nura gets murdered before Belle is murdered herself. So, since we're talking about the death of the secondary main characters, let's get into a little bit about what the book mentions of the Sea of the Damned, the Ferry of the Damned, the Ferryman, and the cycle of life and death in the Sea of Thieves. So I mentioned before that the book explained my fan wank in great detail, and like you, I did not expect that to actually be the case. The fact that this book went out of its way to do this, I think, would have made me love this book regardless of the quality of the writing and the prose and the story, but it was more of a cherry on top than anything. But holy shit, I love this. So, Cameron, do you want to describe to the people how it's related to in the book, just in the broad terms? You don't have to read a passage, but just like if you recall how the book explains how life and death and rebirth work.
I mean, more or less the same way they do in the game. You might actually be the better person for this, Hyle.
Okay, fair enough. So basically...
By the way, just so everybody knows, one consequence of this book being treated like an in-universe object, there are no page numbers, so it's pretty difficult to remember where to cite a certain passage if you haven't put some kind of physical bookmark in it.
Yeah, I really should have bookmarked it with post-it notes or something. As it was, I was only using a bookmark when I was reading it. And I was using the metallic-looking Sea of Thieves sticker that came with my Fangamer Kraken shirt. So that's what I was using for a bookmark during it. But okay, so basically, the fact that you can come back from death, it's presented as a consequence of the ferryman essentially being on the take. The ferryman, he's essentially the pirate equivalent of Charon or Charon, however you pronounce it, from Greek mythology. The guy who rides the river Styx and takes the coin, and if you can't pay him, he throws you overboard. Well, the ferryman is a little bit kinder than that. He rides this ethereal sea that apparently the book doesn't say this. This is how I reconcile it with how we've seen death before in the Donkey Kong universe. I imagine this is the sea that the Grim Reapers will take people on to ferry them into the afterlife. Whether that Grim Reaper be Greg for animals or the Reaper from Ghoulies for humans. The Reaper kind of will guide you across the Sea of the Damned to the afterlife. However, what the ferryman does is he circumvents the Reapers. The ferryman will teleport your body, your entire injured, dying body, clothing and all, to the Ferry of the Damned on the Sea of the Damned. And from there, I guess he'll heal you while you're in this state of afterlife. And so then he'll open up the doorway back where the captain quarters should be. And the pirate can then go through and return to the world of the living, healed as if they were never dead.
Now, I think where this is described, there's a little bit of an allusion to the death tax that ultimately does not seem to be coming to fruition in the game. But it leaves them enough room, I think, to kind of ignore that, as do several things that directly reference the game.
Yeah, so here's where my takeaway from it is. There was a death tax at one time that the ferryman would charge, but as Sea of Thieves, the game, as it began on March 20th, or maybe a little bit before that, the ferryman has waived that, at least for the time being.
Well, I mean, with all the players playing it, he probably has a Scrooge McDuckian vault of gold by now.
Well, see, my thinking is maybe the Pirate Lord, upon the Sea of Thieves receiving this boom of pirates that eventually launches the golden age of piracy around the Atlantic Ocean, the Pirate Lord has conversed with the ferryman and said, "Waive your fee, I will pay you whatever it takes." But don't let it come from the pirates themselves. Just give them an infinite loop.
And we actually do know that they've communicated, because the in-game descriptions for the ferryman items, there's at least one of them references the ferryman and the Pirate Lord in contact with each other.
Yes. That's very important. So what I love though was that the book is very clear that this wasn't always the case, and it used to be death for a pirate meant death. And it also states that maybe someday death will mean permanent death again. So they leave this wiggle room that in this nebulous period of time that the game Sea of Thieves will exist in, death will not have a meaning. But before it and after it, it potentially will again. So by the time we catch up to modern times, by the time, whether it be 1978 in the time travel sequences in Grunny's Revenge, or 1994 when we join the Donkey Kong universe in Donkey Kong Country, or 2000 when we meet Captain Black Eye. Maybe that's how Captain Black Eye is still around. I don't know, but all the same, at some point in that future, death will mean death again. But for pirates in the Sea of Thieves, they get to circumvent it thanks to help from the other side in the Ferryman and the Pirate Lord. And it also opens up the wiggle room then for, okay, so if this is the case, then how are there skellies? How are there ghosts? And there are two possibilities then. Either skellies and ghosts predate the Ferryman orchestrating this, or these are souls that fell overboard and as Belle said, slipped through the cracks and came back to Earth in spectral or skelly form. Which this is the kind of stuff that most developers wouldn't think about. And this is what I love about being a Rare fan, is not only does Rare consider all of the avenues, but they know their fans are considering all the avenues as well. So this is the first time where as a professional fan wanker, Cameron, I barely have anything to fan wank because they've already done my job for me. All I have to worry about is how it relates to fucking Donkey Kong games from 20 years ago. That's pretty sweet. That's a sweet deal for me. I have to applaud, and I don't know, I know Mike Chapman is very invested in this kind of shit. Just based on the discussions I've had with him, both in person and online, and I don't know if it's coming from him or if it's coming from Park and Hentz or Alcock or Loveday, if he's getting his tendrils in there, but wherever this is coming from, it's much appreciated because this is beautiful. This is beautiful stuff.
Can I just say how wonderful it is to see this play out? On the very first page where Jean is writing, you see this sort of this sorry you got killed, Nura, and then it if you don't know any better about the Ferry of the Damned, this is kind of like an abrupt tonal shift in the book. And then a few paragraphs down, Nura and Belle are back to heckling the writer of the journal, so you kind of get this immediate undercutting of, oh, okay, things work out.
Right, yes. So real quick, before we get to what's essentially the weird conclusion to the journal, I want to talk about the Pirate Lord just a little bit. So the Pirate Lord, we've seen him bandied about since the summer of 2016. They released that little mini figure of him for San Diego Comic-Con that year, and that we assumed he was going to be the captain of the Ferry of the Damned. And then we were all a little surprised when it was this ferryman character instead. But the Pirate Lord, he looks like the zombie pirate captain from Ghoulies. But anyway, the Pirate Lord, he is presented in the book as the kind of original pirate, the one who developed the lifestyle, the first one who decided, hey, this is what a pirate is. This is who I am. This is who other people can be. He's very much like the ground zero for all of this. And so he's presented as, even though he's somebody who's long been dead, he still very much influences the world. He still very much haunts it. And he's still very much orchestrating some of these events from the other side or from this side as a ghost.
He's also, like, across the board portrayed as looking like this, like, very jovial, like, you could have a grog with this guy sort of portrayal, despite being this mystical presence.
He's like smelly Santa Claus.
He is. He's ghost zombie Santa.
Yes, yes. So from this point on, back to the narrative, as it were, the book basically becomes several pages of gibberish from Jean, who has no formal education at all. And it's interesting because Belle is not the best writer in the book, especially compared to Faintheart. Belle doesn't use contractions properly. She doesn't spell words properly. But you still get a good sense of what she's saying. She kind of stumbles over her thoughts a little bit. Imagine the way I sound on these podcasts after I've had an Angry Orchard or two. That's what Belle is in writing. Still conveys her point, but it's a little muddled. Jean, on the other hand, is a complete Nimrod. And like I said, it's all phonetically spelled, so none of it is spelled correctly. You all have to sound you have to sound every word out in your head. And it's kind of a trial to do so.
Notably, the exception to this is, and it's noticeable, like, in addition to the writing style being different, the way Jean is treating the book is noticeably different from everybody else. Belle and Flameheart kind of treated this as like a captain's log. Jean is kind of treating it like a scrapbook.
Hey, lads!
There's a lot of shoved in the pages here, recipes, and
yes.
Lyrics to some of the in-game shanties, and for the benefit of the audience, these have proper spellings.
Yeah, I imagine he just transcribed these perfectly from like actual sheets he had on board. So yeah, what happens is we learn that as Belle was being sent to her execution, she handed the journal to Jean as kind of this passive-aggressive, you did this to me, this is yours now. And so we learn from him, though, he did not want to be a turncoat. He's a sniveling coward who felt like he didn't know what to do, and he was forced into the situation by Cole and his men of the Twisted Knife. But in the end, Belle and Nura return from the dead and launch what reminded me of Batman's return to Gotham in The Dark Knight Rises. They even have the flaming insignia light up the sails, and they painted themselves in red. And initially, I had to read this very carefully because this is still Jean describing this, and it's hard to kind of parse out at first.
And you see comments from Nura and Belle in the corner that they wish that Jean hadn't written about it so they could have.
Yeah. They were actually lamenting that, Nura was lamenting that she didn't get to ever be the main narrator in the book because Jean used up the remaining pages, which gives the book a very abrupt ending. Which is funny because you have this moment of great tragedy with these characters who you kind of you grow to care about every character, I think, except for John. You never really spend enough time with him, and he's kind of portrayed as the very Lando Calrissian-esque traitor but one who barely ever has a redeeming moment. I guess he has a redeeming moment, but it's not as awesome as what Lando does because it's not Billy D. Williams. It's a fat idiot chef who cooks rats. But you have this moment of great tragedy with Belle and Nura getting murdered, getting executed, and then you have all of these nauseating recipes of like cooked rats and just meat stews that are just rank and sound horrifying. Turtle stew. And by the way, on the recipe, these look like recipes that were taped in by Jean, and then he crossed them out and added his own substitutions. But on the turtle recipe, you've got it's soaked in blood, which I think the implication is it was blood from a turtle that he killed while following the recipe. But anyway, yeah, it becomes almost like a farce in its closing pages. Like, you've had this moment of horrific tragedy, and then the village idiot takes over the last few pages. It's like if Jesus was crucified in the New Testament, and then Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel, decided to narrate the rest up through Revelation. Anyway, but yeah, them returning painted in like battle paint. I initially had to read that very carefully because I thought, is this them aligned with Flameheart? Did Flameheart like come back? But Flameheart does never comes back in this book. And so they reclaim their ship. They murder Cole and his men. They make nice with Jean. And then the pages just kind of run out. And the last thing we see is a sketch of this cursed chest that was lost to the ocean. Which has a face on it, by the way. A shifting face on it. And that's the last thing we see. So, the remaining mysteries of the book, Cameron, in no certain order here. Who exactly is the Flameheart that we know is the Skelly with the flaming heart, the flaming ribcage that will presumably appear in the book, or appear in the game? Is Diving Bell the same Bell that was depicted in the E3 2017 statue?
I feel like it's worth noting in the book this is Bell spelled B-E-L, and I think, though there's very little material that spells out Bell, the name of Statue Bell, I think a few sources like Spur Creative, the company that made it, their video on the construction of the statue, they spell it B-E-L-L-E.
Okay.
Still doesn't rule it out. But
no,
I feel like it's an important clarification to make. That's why this is ambiguous.
But if this was the same Bell, I will take this spelling as canon over the statue website.
I mean, Grog Males is spelled with only one G in his signature and 2 on the lyric sheet, so this wouldn't be the first time. But
yes.
Love you, Greg.
Remember your own canon, Greg Males. So, what was the mermaid's cursed chest all about? Where did it come from? Did the mermaids or merfolk make it? Was it something that they were responsible for or were merely afflicted by? And where in the ocean did it sink? Is it still out there in-game, or will it be out there in-game? Who was the mysterious...
The art we see on the last page of this book is very much in the vein of the concept art for actual in-game items we've seen. This does not seem like something that was created specifically for the book.
No, not at all. So that makes me wonder if they've got this in storage in their computer files waiting to implement it. Who was the mysterious man who spent years trying to uncover the chest? And what connection does he have to this mysterious woman or Trouble the Cat? We don't know. What was this island in the wilds? Does it not exist?
They actually do kind of go into where Trouble came from, but I'll leave that for the people who actually read the book to find out.
Fair enough. What was the island in the wilds? Does it not exist currently in the game, or is it behind the Devil's Shroud waiting to be uncovered? What about the island temple with the merfolk in the Shores of Plenty near Golden Sands? Will this be used as a springboard for future Sea of Thieves events? So these are all the questions we're left with upon the completion of the book. Not even counting silly fan trivia like the Salty Hippo or, the Captain Black Eyes, the origin for him becoming the captain of the ship, the ship he procured. But yeah, the book leaves us a lot. It doesn't really end on a high note because, again, the last part of the book is narrated by an idiot. So you don't really have this triumphant climax. It just kind of stops. But it's very much matter of fact. It's very much like a slice of life. Well, of course, the story in A Sea of Thieves continues after this. So this is but merely a glimpse. So we don't have a complete narrative in the pages of the book.
It's the very meta sort of way of saying the rest of the story is yet to be written.
Exactly. So I choose to believe right now that all of these questions will eventually be brought up in the game, either through major events, these weekly events that Rare has planned, these expansions that they have planned, or maybe just through small little things that we'll find in game, Easter eggs for people who actually read the book. I don't know, but I have to imagine Flameheart, at the very least, is going to be a major deal at some point in the future. And I'm really looking forward to that now more than ever, now that I've actually read the book and I've spent time with one of the Flamehearts, whoever he might actually be, if he ends up being the one in the game. So Cameron, your final thoughts on Tales from the Sea of Thieves?
Yeah, this has far and away blown away any expectations I had for this book. If you want like just this unique it's a unique experience. It's owning a physical object that feels like it could have come out of this universe. If you're into like just the minutia of world building and seeing insight into characters and worlds that don't necessarily come across in the game, and honestly just getting even a little bit more attachment to like something like Flameheart, yeah, you do want to pick this up.
Yeah, honestly, if you're one of the people I know who are listening to
I feel
this,
like I got a D- on that book report.
No. I think, considering we're two of the only people who are ever do a book report on this book, we should be graded on a curve. A bell curve. No, I think that even if you're on the fence about Sea of Thieves, because I know a lot of you who are listening haven't been won over. I know people in the DK Vine forum who are outright almost like celebrating every negative review of Sea of Thieves because it doesn't fit your, I also say, narrow vision of what Rare should be doing. There is stuff in the book for you to like. Like I said, these connections with Black Eye and a Salty Hippo, and this, you get the sense that this is the same shared world we all know and love and cherish, and that this book is actually part of that, and an actual physical piece from that. If you can get into that kind of role-playing, that kind of fan-wanking yourself, this is going to be a thrilling time. If you're going to go into this book with, negative connotations, if you're just going to be determined to hate it, then you'll hate it. But if you're going to be in the right spirit of things, this is a hell of a good time, and I have to recommend it. Like, I did not expect to be recommending this book with all of this vim and vigor, but good lord, like Paul Davies, I want to get you on the show at some point and interview you about this, because the process that it must have took to pull all this together, coordinating with Rare, using all of their notes, trying to pull everything together, this world you did not yourself invent, and having to do it concurrently with the game in development, and getting like most of the details accurate. Any details that aren't accurate to the game can be just explained away as particular instances, and there had to be
so much careful treading in writing this book.
Oh my god, I have the utmost respect for the Paul Davies and anybody else who contributed to the book. And now that we've ripped this bandage off, this very uncomfortable bandage of having essentially expanded universe material for what we talk about here on DK Vine, I kind of want more of these in-universe relic books from Rare. I mean, where's our Mr. Pants autobiography, Cameron? Where is it? Or the folder of police reports from Ghoulsville and the Gloom, filed on Baron von Ghoul and his child abducting ways. That would be a great read. What about Boggy Bear's crusted over lad mag? I think that would be pretty good. Hey, you know what? I think I know a way Rare employees could sign that one too.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.